Welcome to the podcast from Eden Worship Center. Because we believe that it is God's Word that does God's work in God's people, we want you to hear the gospel preached in the gathering of believers. We want you to read it for yourself and to join us as we think together and talk together about the sermon from this past week and what's going on in our world. You can join the conversation by sending in your comments and questions to edenwc@hotmail.com. May God cause His Word to come alive in your heart today.
Well, hey, welcome to the Midweek podcast. This is Pastor Matt.
And Pastor Jon.
All right, so this week we're going to be looking at Genesis chapter 5 that Pastor Jon spoke on this past week. Just going back through some of the genealogies, what John MacArthur referred to as a just repeated obituary, a collection of obituaries, just one after another. He lived, he had sons, he died.
And
he lived, he had sons, and he died. And just thinking about that together for just a little bit. So Pastor Jon, any thoughts on sermon from this past week?
Got several. But, no, there's
got some good stuff in store. Yeah.
There's some things that hit me when studying that I didn't mention. One of the biggest ones, to start on a real high note, was how heartbroken Adam must have been. The chapter ends with the birth of Noah, or Noah having sons, and I don't think it's a spoiler alert to say what comes in chapter 6, what comes next with the flood, and that Adam died just one generation before the flood. And so he spent 900 years watching everything descend into utter wickedness and deprivation, and for 900 years knowing, yeah, this is all my fault.
This is my fault.
Like, I can't imagine that.
Yeah.
So
at least I opened the door to this.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
I may not be personally responsible for these people's choices and life decisions, but I opened the door to this.
Yep. Yeah. So that really struck me with the 60, 70, 80 years that we have.
Yeah.
I started thinking, okay, when I'm 80 years old, looking back over my life, what do I want to sit there and go, oh yeah, I had a hand in that? Do I want to have a hand in things that were God honoring, or things that, like for Adam, and there were things that he could look back on as God honoring. I mean, he obviously passed down the worship and knowledge of God.
Yeah.
But what do I want to look back on and say I had a hand in that? So there's a good upper to start with.
Well, so in thinking about that, and just from a pastoral standpoint, you and I end up talking with people who, it's not just pastoral. You see it in your relationships where you're talking with somebody and they're fishing for compliments. You know, oh, I don't know. I just did the best that I could. What do you think about it? Oh, no, it's great. You're super awesome. You know, or, you know, things have gone wrong and like, I don't know, I did the best that I could. Is it all my fault? And they're fishing for, no, it's not your fault. Mm-hmm. No, it's fine. You're a good person, you know.
Yep.
Person X over here, they're the evil one, you know.
Yeah.
And the reality is, pastorally, we don't do people any favors by looking at maybe the track record of damage in a marriage or a family or children or jobs, and going, no, listen, you're a good person. This is all somebody else's fault, when the reality is their heart is testifying to them. That's why they're asking the question.
Yes.
I have some guilt associated with this, and I think it's good. And so benefit of us living not in the time of Adam, but in the time of Christ, the second Adam, where we quickly and freely acknowledge our sin, our guilt, our missteps, where we have opened the door, especially in the places of responsibility God has given us. So work and family and, you know, all those sort of things. But then also be able to say, I have confessed my sin. I have laid it at the foot of the cross. I am working daily to put to death that sin. And therefore, I don't live under the condemnation of that sin, because I know that even though I'm terrible, God is good, and he is working all things together for good. And his plan is bigger than my failure. And we're sort of preaching the gospel to ourselves while not just sort of attempting to pat ourselves on the back or somebody else on the back. Like, no, it's fine. We don't do any benefit to them because their heart's still testifying against them.
Yeah.
So we can either lie to them and fool them, or I think we can be upfront and go, well, yeah, we all fall short of the glory of God. Mm-hmm. And yet he has redeemed us. He's ransomed us, knowing that's coming.
Yes.
And he still calls us to himself. Therefore, our trust is in the second Adam, not the first.
Absolutely.
The first had to do it all right himself. He had to be perfect, blameless, holy before God.
Yeah.
The second Adam in Christ, he was perfect, blameless, holy before God, and then has imputed that righteousness to us.
Yes. And I think that's what's so incredible when the Bible talks about how God adopted us.
Yeah.
I always liken it to a couple going to an adoption agency, and the lady's like, I've got the perfect child for you. And she takes him out to the playground where all the kids are playing.
Where the children are kept.
Where the children are kept. And they're walking over to this bench, and there's this little girl sitting on a bench, maybe 6 years old, blonde, curly hair, big blue eyes. She's sitting there playing with a doll. And you're like, oh, she is so sweet. She's such a cutie. And as you're walking over there, a 12-year-old boy runs by and snatches the doll and pushes her off the bench. And as he's running across the playground, he runs into another group of kids who are playing with a ball. He picks up the ball and throws it over to the fence. And then he climbs up on top of some monkey bars, and he sits there smiling as the little girl is crying. The kids are watching their ball bounce down into the road. And he's sitting there smiling about this. And you look at the lady from the adoption agency, you go, lady, that kid over there who just did all this, that's the one I want to adopt. And that's the picture of God adopting us. God didn't go for the cute little girl. He went for the monstrous little boy, like me. Like you said, knowing full well what I would be like.
Yeah.
And he chose me to adopt me. Just such an amazing thing when we think about that.
Yeah.
He knew everything beforehand, and still.
Encouraging. It's interesting thinking about that image of the little girl, cute, adorable, has so much to offer. In this giant lineage of Adam to Noah, we're not even told what they had to offer.
Yeah.
The chapter before in Cain's line, we find out about some of their creativity and inventiveness, things that are still being utilized today. Mm-hmm. And in Adam's, we're just given the people.
Yeah.
With the exception of Enoch, and we're told of his piety and righteousness, his walk with God. Mm-hmm. Other than that, it's just a blank slate of obituary. It's boring obituaries.
Yeah.
Born, had sons, died.
Yes.
And yet God was at work even in the mundane things of life and death, in birth, in death, and everything in between. God is at work in that.
Yeah.
And they weren't beloved and chosen because of their accomplishments, but because God chose to put them in his family.
Yes.
It's kind of a cool image there.
It is. And the contrast in the world, you look at Cain's line and they have all these accomplishments. Seth's line, no real accomplishments to speak of, at least.
At least not that we get here yet.
Yes. And yet there was a godliness in that line. And that really is, for the world, all they have is their accomplishments.
Yeah.
Which in the end might be written on a page somewhere.
Right.
And that's all they have. Yet in the godly line, they have a Messiah that they're looking forward to, a promised offspring. It really is. It kind of, when you read this about, he was the father of instruments. He was the father. Wow, that's really cool. And you think of their eternal destiny.
Yeah.
And the world today, and you think, you think of Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, and man, I wonder what it'd be like to have all that money and da-da-da, da-da-da. And in the end, what has he got? Now, I don't know what his spiritual life is like.
Right.
But,
well, he's missing out on being friends with you and me. Let's
That's right.
let's come right to the heart of this thing. That it is sad.
Yeah, there's really nothing to be envious of.
It strikes me as interesting thinking about some of that hole in the story that we have with these guys. Just a list of names, and yet with a couple of them, we actually end up getting more from the New Testament than we do the Old Testament, in which they're situated. Mm-hmm. So Hebrews 11, by faith Enoch, when he was taken up, that he should not see death, he was not found because God had taken him. Now before he was taken, he was commended as having pleased God. Okay, well, we're not given any information other than he walked with God and he was not, because God took him.
Yeah.
And then it's in association with him, with Enoch, that we get this rather famous coffee cup verse: without faith it is impossible to please him, to please God, for whoever would draw near must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who diligently seek him. By faith Noah warned through his life. And so we get these guys sort of plucked out of this Genesis chapter 5 genealogy.
Yeah.
And it's in the context of their lives that we just know nothing about. We have no record. The flood has washed away not only the people, but the record of the people.
Yes.
And it's from the New Testament that we end up getting this idea of faith to believe that God exists, that he rewards those who diligently seek him. Like that's drawn from the life of Enoch.
Yeah.
Just an interesting
Yes.
thing. I was thinking, just reading through that this week. Strange how that works. Especially given that we live, if you think about the pages and the chapters of this, we live in the pages of our own life so much where we don't see the next chapter, we don't see the next book. And so when we can't see how it works out, we can't see how all the little pieces fit together. We go, God, I'm not so sure you're still in this. I'm not sure you're good. I'm not sure, definitely not sure you're working for my good in this.
Yeah.
And the reality is, if you just looked at Enoch's life, and I know we're kind of pigeonholing on him a little bit, compared to everybody else, he had about 1/3 the lifespan.
Yeah.
Well, that was tragedy. By our standards,
Right.
That's tragedy. That's somebody in their mid-20s being taken. And once we've removed that from us living in that moment, in that chapter, we look back and we go, no, that's glory.
Oh, yeah.
Out of all of these guys, we're like, man, I wish I was Enoch.
Yes. Yes.
I remember as a kid thinking crazy thoughts like, I wonder if I am spiritual enough and I have that intimate of a walk with God. I wonder if he'll just take me.
Yes.
What will my family think when I just don't come home someday? That it's funny. He becomes the hero of this chapter in our heads, even though if you just look at it from a practical standpoint, he had 1/3 the lifespan of everybody else.
Yeah.
Now we don't begrudge him that because it's 365 years.
Yes.
So, it's like,
Still had a
listen,
little bit of
buddy,
time.
you had a good run.
Yeah.
Quit complaining. Yeah. Any other thoughts from some of the guys who were in here?
Well, I did think it was interesting. I mean, I don't think it's anything like worthy of huge note or anything, but when you look at Lamech from Cain's line, now there is a Lamech and an Enoch both in Seth and Cain's line, but they're not the same people. The Lamech in Cain's line was a guy we see, as far as we know, was the one who introduced polygamy. He's the first one recorded to introduce polygamy. It seems he was a braggart. Seems he was kind of a bully, very vengeful. Doesn't seem like he was a pleasant person. And then you have Enoch from Seth's line, walked with God. And it's just interesting, as far as cousins go, they were both 7th from Adam. And so it's interesting that, in Cain's line, Lamech, it doesn't say any notable accomplishments. It says, he broke God's pattern of one husband, one man, one woman, and he was a braggart spiteful, vengeful man. And his direct cousin, seventh from Adam, on Seth's line, perhaps one of the godliest guys who ever lived.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was interesting how they're the same distance from Adam, because we've talked about how sin throughout descending lines had this degenerative effect. And especially when you think in our 60, 70, or 80 years, as we're combating sin, some people get tired of combating and they just give in. Mm-hmm. And as years go by, that law of diminishing returns, oh, this used to be exciting, but now I need to go a little bit further. Oh, that's not exciting. Think of the depravity we have in 70 years of life. So here are people living 600, 700 years. So I can only imagine the depravity that these people must have sunk to. But still you see the same distance from Adam, and yet in Enoch, a man who walked with God, which tells you that it really isn't about us. It's about God. Enoch wasn't the way he was because of his walk. He was the way he was because of who he walked with.
Yeah.
And just seeing that contrast between those two guys.
I was thinking about that same thing with the two Lamechs. So you have the one in Cain's line who brags about killing someone, breaks God's pattern in one man and one woman, takes two wives. At least as far as the way the story is told to us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe we're casting a little shadow on him, but that's the way the story is told.
Yeah, definitely cast a shadow.
And then the other Lamech, who's going to be the father of Noah. And there's a lot of Old Testament names that end up reflecting the person's character, reflecting something that they're going to do, sort of their place, their moment in history. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I've always wondered about that. Like, did they name them later? We're gonna call you Child 2 until we see how this thing turns out. And then once we figured out, no, you're Jacob. You're the rebellious one. You're the supplanter. You know. No, I don't think that's how it worked. Anyways, so what you see in the good Lamech, it feels like the good Superman and the bad Superman.
Yes, Bizarro.
Remember him? Weirdo. Is he lives 182 years. He fathers a son and calls him Noah. And this time we're told expressly, this is what this name means. Mm-hmm. So I know you and I had gone back a little bit before Sunday on Methuselah.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that you hear a lot is that Methuselah's name means after he dies. It comes.
Yeah.
And you said, well, I'm not really finding any evidence of that in different things. It's interesting. I in just sort of prep, try and read and listen to a variety of like really, really smart people, and had two of them say that in their thing. I'm like, oh, one of them being Al Mohler. And I'm like, hey, listen, if he can pull it off,
yes,
we can claim it. But
yes,
with all of the cloud, in fact, we didn't even talk about that on Sunday. Like, what is the potential of that? Because at the end of the day, if we're not sure, who cares?
Right.
Well, Lamech tells us, and in naming him Noah, here's what I'm saying. That out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring relief from our work and from our painful toil of our hands. It's almost like this guy who, rather than boasting in his own strength, that like the bad Lamech is in this place where he's looking all the way back to the garden, to the curse that happened there, that has been a part of their lives every day, remembering why it's there, how it got there, and yet the promise of God that there is one who's coming. There's an offspring who's coming, who's going to make this right, who's going to give us, in his statement, relief from our work and our painful toil.
Yes.
I thought that was really interesting. Just this sort of under the surface hope in God that just won't go away, even as the world is literally going to hell.
Yeah.
Like so bad. God does not offer repentance. He doesn't offer a quote unquote second chance to these people. Now, I think as we look at chapter 6, we're going to see that the Spirit of God was at work in there, because
Right.
God's going to say to them, my Spirit isn't going to be striving with you, pleading with you, calling to you forever. So God's Spirit is there. He is calling to people. And yet it's so bad that God says, I'm going to wipe out all of humanity. That there's such pervasive contamination. I'm going to be done with all. Like, that's way worse.
Yes.
Like, we think our time is bad. Like, we generally look at the past election and go like, oh, the worst it's ever been. Never been this bad before. This was so bad, God hits the reset button.
Yes.
And, there again, not that he's caught by surprise. He's not. Not that he's moved. He's not. He's immutable. He doesn't move. And yet, this was really bad. And in the context of that, Lamech's still hoping in God's redemption yet to come.
Yeah. I think two things that really stick out to me with that is one, that the name Noah ties as the shortest name in this genealogy. And it means, out of the ground the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring relief from our work and from the painful toil of our hands. That's pretty efficient language.
The names crack me up because we actually, Josiah read the scripture on Sunday.
Yes.
And we had sent it to him ahead of time, like, listen, there's a lot of names. Bummer for you. You got an entire chapter of genealogies. Yes. I mean, you got things like Methuselah and Mahalalel. And then right in the middle of all that, like Jared.
Jared. Bob.
Pretty sure his last name's Yoder, Like, what were they thinking?
Yes.
Names that you can't even, like, you look at them and you go, I don't even know how to say this. And then you just pop a good Jared out of there. Like, are you kidding me?
Well, Mahalalel sounds like a little kid trying to say aluminum.
Yeah.
Mahalalel.
Yeah, the tongue just got going and couldn't quit.
Yes.
Yeah, it's funny. Noah being the shortest one, then it has this big, long. Here's what I mean by this.
Actually, I wrote a children's story, and one of the characters is Tommy Tonka Willapilla Hamatop, and his name in English is Bob. So that's what that reminds me of. But the other thing that sticks out to me, that's a little more deep, is it really is a contrast between the Cain Lamech, who is very self-reliant. Yeah. I will handle this. I will take care of things myself. And this Lamech, who realizes, I can't do anything, but here's one who can.
Yeah,
I'm powerless before what the Lord has done, but the Lord will send relief.
Yeah,
just the humility versus the arrogance between those two Lamechs.
Right. I also thought it was funny. We were reading it on Sunday. I don't know why. Have you ever had this thing where, like, you've read it, and then when someone reads it in church on Sunday, something occurs to you, and it's really bad if it's like something funny, because you can't just bust out laughing.
It's not like a podcast.
Yeah, where I can ruin it by just jumping in and saying stuff. Actually, I think I did ruin it on Sunday. You made a terrible joke about two doctors, and you're like,
yes.
Are you laughing at the joke? You're laughing at me. And I'm like, no, we're laughing at you. We're groaning for you. In verse 21, Lamech fathers Noah, he has other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. 777. And it just occurs to me, all of the giant Christian weirdos out there are like, oh yeah, I knew it. There it is. That's the sign.
There it is.
It's like when you see passed around on Christian Facebook, as if that's a thing.
Oh yeah.
This picture of a cloud that if you look at it from the right angle, you're pretty sure it's Jesus.
Close one eye, squint the other, and turn the lights out. Man, it's just like it.
It's our Savior. Oh man, what kind of ridiculous people are we?
Well, I've heard ones on Lamech's age and also on Enoch's, because he was 365, which is how many days there are in a year.
There it is.
Yep. Yep. It is interesting.
If there's any future preachers listening to this podcast, just preach the text. All right?
Yes.
Don't superimpose your own weirdness on the text. Just preach the text, because the gospel is powerful, and God's promised that his word won't return void. And if you have some creative stupidity that you think is going to make you cool, people will forget about it, and it someday make fun of you on a podcast like this. So there's my advice.
Yes. Yes. Well, I always thought it was interesting that Methuselah was 969 years when he died. Each of those is divisible by 3, which means 333, which is half of 666. So he was like a minor devil figure.
Oh, gosh.
See, it's right there in the text.
That's really helpful.
That's how I feel with a lot of these.
Uh-huh.
Like, really? That's what you got out of it.
Man. And how easy is it for us to get so bogged down and looking at stuff like that? Man, just wait till this coming Sunday where there again, John MacArthur, I was listening to something from him last night. He described Genesis 6, 1 through 4 as like the only thing worse than a migraine headache would be if we had to preach on Genesis 6, 1 through 4, 2 weeks in a row. So we're only doing it 1 week.
Yes.
Even great Bible teachers are like, man, this is muddy water, and there's all kinds of weird speculation attached to it. Just preach the text.
Just preach the text.
Like, God told us this stuff for a reason. Preach the text. Don't attempt to explain it away. Don't attempt to add to it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't take away from it. I think Revelation had something to say to those who would add to or take away from God's written. Now, that was about the book of Revelation. Yeah. Right? So that's not a universal thing for all of Scripture because you cannot take away from God's word.
Right.
So,
well,
anyways.
I mean, when I looked at the text that I had to preach and saw that it was genealogy and ages, I was like, why do you hate me? But then looking at, the Nephilim in chapter 6, I'm like, oh, I like the passage I got.
Yeah. I'll take the obituaries.
I'll take the obituaries. Yes.
Good. Well, any other thoughts from the passage?
I didn't spend as much time talking about Enoch and walking with God. There's a lot more that I got out of it personally than what went into the sermon, which I think is probably common with most pastors. But just that whole, he walked with God, and what that must have meant and looked like, the intimacy that he had that was apart from anything that any ritual or ceremony or sacrifice, that it was the intimacy that is implied with that word walked. And just looking back at my life, and do I measure my intimacy with God on how good I'm being? How obedient am I? Have I done this? Did I have my quiet time this morning? Did I pray for 2 hours, or was it only 20 minutes? You know, those gauges that so many times that I and maybe others try to gauge our intimacy with God, and it's really not. It's, am I walking with God? Am I seeking to spend time with him, not because it's on my checklist, but because I want to spend time with him? That was something that challenged me this week.
Yeah. So interesting phrase that it chooses to use there in verse 22. Enoch walked with God, and not just he was a follower of God or a believer in God, but this is the same type of language as God walks with Adam in the cool of the day. It's reminiscent there again, like we're super close in proximity back to the garden, and it's a broken fellowship, so it's not the same as that unhindered intimacy that Adam has with his creator, where sin is not part of this. And yet there's an intentionality of, like, walking with somebody is an intentional act.
Right. Yeah.
Even when every once in a while we'll go to a big city and be walking down the street, and you're walking with hundreds of people. Like, there's hundreds of people on the sidewalk. And maybe it's because I'm a big weirdo when it comes to personal space. I'm really intentional about who I'm quote unquote walking with.
Oh yeah.
You know, who's right next to me, who's immediately behind me, who's in front of me, like proximity. I'm thinking about things like that.
Yes.
Oh, I'm just it's a miracle that I leave the house. That's what I'm telling you. It's kind of amazing. But, you're walking in the city with your family. You're intentional about where your wife is and where your kids are.
Right.
And, for the wives, how am I walking in relation to my husband or to my children and kids? Where's mom and dad? And you'll have moments where you forget they exist because you're seeing something new and big and cool. And then all of a sudden they get out of your sight for just a second. And there's that panic of, I have to be close to them.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
I think we so often reduce our quote unquote walk with God to like you said, a checklist of things of a prayer time or a reading the Bible time or a going to church time, as if these constitute our walk. Well, shoot, if that's all that you walked, you're basically a person in a wheelchair who periodically, like for 20 minutes a day, look, I stood up. It's a miracle.
Yes.
Like,
yep.
I was going to make a comment about people standing up out of wheelchairs, but just long enough to be on television, and then it's waiting for them on the other side of the stage. It's all show, and it's making us feel better rather than this just occurred to me. My watch tracks my steps.
Oh yeah.
And if it's not with me, it doesn't track my steps.
Yep.
It's not counting them. If it's with me, if it's on me, whether I'm aware of it or not, every step is accounted for. How far I go is accounted for. Your heart rate is accounted for. Like all kinds of information that, I don't know, Apple or the government probably shouldn't have. But, I mean, you think about that, pull that into our relationship, our walk with God, that he goes before me. He hems me in behind. Like he is with me. He leads me. He guides me. I mean, think of some of the imagery of the Psalms as him being a shepherd to us.
Yes.
And it's this growing awareness in every moment of the presence of God, of the reality of God, of the call of God on our lives. That begins to translate into a life walked in faithfulness and obedience to God.
Yes.
Rather than a life of unfaithfulness that is just sort of like has blips on the map, little points that just jump out of what looks like just ridiculous piety, holiness. I say all the right things when I come to church. And I think this is a giant problem for the church in America, which is easy and comfortable and really doesn't cost you anything.
Right.
I can have moments that look really good on a Sunday, but if the rest of my life isn't reflective of that faith, belief, walk with God, well, there's a chance everything that happened on Sunday was just for show.
Yeah.
And if you're the only one who's being fooled by this, then you're literally fooling yourself.
Yes. Yeah, I think, James says, be not only hearers of the word, but also doers of the word. He says, don't deceive yourself.
Yeah.
If you're just a hearer and not a doer, you are deceiving yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a good encouragement that we find right here, just the simple verse of Enoch walking with God.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, it's such intimacy that one day he walks with God and he was not, for God took him.
Yeah.
Now we're not expecting some mini one-person rapture to go on. Like, has anybody seen Pastor John? He's late for work this morning. Good thing it didn't say driving with God, because that could be dangerous.
Yes.
I hope he takes the whole car too, or now, the person behind you is in mortal danger. We're not expecting that, but in our brief human lifetimes, we have an opportunity, a privilege to walk with God. Mm-hmm. And then we know at the end that promise, he will give his angels charge over us.
Yes.
That he will himself come and bring us to himself.
Yes. And I love how John MacArthur pointed out that this was like a picture of followers of Christ who walk with God. Now, we may not escape physical death like Enoch did, but walking with God, as the passage you read in Hebrews 11, that he pleased God. That is such a wonderful picture of us and eternal life, escaping the second death. I never really thought of it as a picture of that, but as we walk with God, put our confidence, our trust in God, in Christ alone, that it's a wonderful picture of we too will escape death.
Yeah.
Maybe not physical death, but that spiritual death, which between the two, if I could only escape one, it's the one that God in his grace has taken me out of, rescued me from.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Well, looking forward to jumping into chapter 6. I may or may not be sick on Sunday, so I'll pass my notes on to you. It should go just fine.
Then I will know that you hate me.
Dang it. So maybe in the last 10 minutes, it would be good just to talk about a little bit the announcement that we made on Sunday, asking people to pray for Pastor John, Kara, their family in decision-making with a job opportunity that has come their way.
Yes.
And we didn't have a whole lot of time together on Sunday to go into much detail on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I did just say we're going to try and talk about it in about 10 minutes. So we won't take forever, I promise, talking about it now. But maybe just for the sake of people listening who don't have any idea what Life Action is.
Oh, yeah.
What is the ministry? What was your role in the ministry before? Like, why is it close to your heart? And yeah, let's just start there.
Okay. Life Action, it's comprised of a few different ministry foci, I think is the plural of the word focus. Makes me sound smarter if I say it like that. No, anyhow. Maybe. But foci what? When I originally joined Life Action back in 2000, Kara joined in 2003, we were both on the road team ministry, the traveling ministry, and we traveled about 10 months out of the year. And what we would do is our team would go into a church for anywhere at that time from 11 to 14 days. And during those 2 weeks, we basically took over every aspect of ministry within the church. We traveled with a team of children's ministers. I was a children's minister on one of the teams for a couple of years. Then I changed teams, and I was the youth director because they also oversaw the youth ministry while we were at that particular church. And then we had a group of singers and musicians who would lead the singing time. And then we had 2 families that traveled. One family, we always just called him the family guy. Don't really know what the official title was. We just always called him the family guy.
Hopefully not associated with the show.
I know. I'm like, they need a new word. They need a new title.
We're going to have to change that one.
And what he would do in the evenings, there was what was called because they met every night during those 2 weeks. And so in the evenings, when it all started, there was what would be called the pre-session. And the kids would all go to their different kids clubs, and I would have the youth doing the youth ministry. And then the family guy would speak to the parents, the husband and wives about relationships, husband-wife relationships, parent-child relationships, family dynamics, and how to apply the Bible to those things. And then at the end of the pre-session, everybody would come into the auditorium for a time of singing. And at the end of that time, at the time of singing, and they would, back then they called them the living giving principles. They would talk some about, usually from 2 Corinthians 8, about godly stewardship. And then at the end of that, the kids would go back to their kids clubs, and then the teens and the parents would all stay in the main service. And then the main speaker would speak on things like, what does forgiveness look like? What does it look like to pursue holiness in your life? Basically, if you're a follower of Christ, that is awesome. But how do you live that way? Mm-hmm. And then that's the message that Life Action wants to give, is how do you live like a follower of Christ? Not just say that you are, but how do you live like it? And so I traveled for 5 years. Kara traveled for 3. And so for those 5 years, I would say it was probably the most formative in my life, my Christian life especially, in what does it look like to daily walk with God? Is it
good parallel?
Thank you.
Nicely.
Is it just a checklist of I had my prayer time, had my Bible time? Because honestly, any unbeliever can read the Bible and pray.
Yep.
So what does it really look like to walk with God? And what does it really look like to be a godly husband or a godly father, a godly mentor? So it was incredibly formative in my life. And so when we got engaged, we left Life Action. And the other aspect, which is the aspect that that I got the job offer for, is the camp ministry. And the camp ministry, they do about 12 weeks of family camps throughout the summer. And it's very similar to what they do as they go into churches. During the family camp times, there will be the kids clubs and the youth group. And then during those sessions, there will be somebody speaking to the parents about relationships and what does it look like to bring a Christian worldview and the Bible into those relationships and to apply them. And then outside of those sessions, all kinds of different activities and games throughout the day, and free time as well for the families. And then the camp also does men's retreats, women's retreats, father-daughter, or father-son, mother-daughter retreats, and different events. And so the job offer I got is actually related to camp this time, rather than the road ministry. So what I would be doing, we would be living there instead of traveling, obviously. We would be living in the Niles Buchanan area. And my official title with the job description that they gave me would be Program Enhancement Manager, which sounds pretty highfalutin. But basically what it would be is, it's been like 8 minutes. I got like,
yeah, right around.
All right. What I would be doing is overseeing and working with two different teams at camp. One of the teams being the activities team to help design, develop, and build activities and carry those activities out with the families. So I'd be being able to work with the families directly there at camps and at retreats and that kind of stuff. And the other team that I'll be working with is their spiritual element team, or their spiritual material team, which is the team that looks at, okay, what is the vision? What do we want to point toward during this year of family camps? And what kind of lessons and curriculum are we going to use to get that across? So I'll be working with them to give some vision and develop the curriculums and help write the curriculums with that. So those would be, in a nutshell, my two main responsibilities as the Program Enhancement Manager. So that's what I'll be doing. And Kara, for the first year, they say when they bring in somebody new, the non-staff spouse, so I'd be the staff spouse, the non-staff spouse, they say...
Peel potatoes all day long.
In the kitchen.
Yeah.
I'm going to move along because I'm wise. I'm not going to say what popped into my head. They say for the first year, we don't want you to do anything. Focus on this new rhythm of life with the family. After that, they say, hey, come on in and help and participate however you want. Yeah. But they really encouraged for that first year to be a time of adjusting to the new rhythm and schedules that camp life bring with it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So how can people specifically be praying for you? I think, since, I don't know, we're recording this, so you might as well point it out. I think it's pretty clear that even though you guys feel torn about leaving home and connection and people here, that this really resonates with your heart and calling and gifting and things like that. Enough so that when you talked about it a second ago, what you said is, I will be doing this. I will be doing this. It just kind of reveals the heart a little bit. So I'm like, somebody's going to pick up on that. I might as well say it. And yet also, before we get to how can people pray, just commend you for, even though this is something that's like right up your alley and desire, that dream job type deal.
Oh, yeah.
I thought you did a good job of bringing it before the elders and wise counsel, or at least counsel, and saying, okay, would you help me think through this and pray through this, consider God's heart, and let's be practical about this as well.
Oh, yeah.
So I commend you for that. But how can people be praying for you as far as guidance and direction, and then some of the practical issues as well?
That is good. It's definitely we want to go, but we don't want to leave kind of thing. And the word bittersweet definitely has a new meaning with that. I would say we definitely need God's wisdom, especially as we look at the process that because this is a support-based ministry, it's considered domestic missions. One, how do we go about pursuing that in a way that comes across that this is because of our heart and not because, hey, we want money.
Yeah.
We want to portray it in the right light, because I mean, you talk to anybody and they'll say, yeah, I would hate to have to ask people, hey, would you support me? I don't know anybody other than mooches who would enjoy that. So pray for wisdom for us in that, and that in this direction as well. That means we have to move. That with this, again, it's not a position that we can take and remain here. So we would have to figure out housing and when should we sell our house, because it is support based. So it's not like there's some concrete start date. It's okay if we do this and sell our house now, but then it takes a year to raise support. Yeah. Then do we pay rent, which is going to be more expensive than a mortgage payment? But if we don't sell our house now, it's that whole thing is weighing on us. So just we would have wisdom in not getting ahead of ourselves, but not procrastinating either, unintentionally procrastinating. And then also that one of my biggest things that has always been with ministry is until we're not where we are where we are. Yeah. And what I mean by that is that we don't check out. We don't say, well, in possibly another year we're going to leave, so let's just kick back. That's not ministry. Ministry is you are where you are until you're not. Yeah. And so that we would remain solid and strong in that philosophy of this is where we are, and so it's 100% until we're not where we are.
Yeah. So that was actually the last question I was going to ask you, is because you are a pastor at EWC and serving in that role, and then looking to transfer out of that role in whatever timetable lies ahead. What are you looking for? How can people be praying for you and coming alongside as far as taking up some of those responsibilities? Like what are some of those things that we need to see God provide in there?
We definitely need those with a bent or a gift of administration to step forward and come alongside, because there are some areas that I'm like the square peg in the round hole. It fills some of the hole, but it doesn't fill the whole hole. And we need some round peg administrators to step forward and really take on some of those things.
Like in what area specifically?
Specifically Sunday school, Christian ed. We are in, I'd say that's probably, there are different things that keep people up at night. And because my gift is not administration, but I'm trying to operate in that, that's a thing that keeps me up at night is Sunday school administration. So if somebody wants to step forward and fill that long before we were to ever leave, that actually would probably be the biggest need right now. And that, as we've talked, would also free me up to work more on seeking out and developing teachers and other leaders, so that I don't have to focus on the organizational aspects. I can focus on the personal aspects, which I'm better at anyhow than organizational aspects with some of those things. So praying for some people to step up in administrative roles is definitely one of the big things to prepare for the eventuality of our departure.
Yeah.
So
Good. As part of that, starting this past Sunday, we pulled you out of teaching the adult Sunday school class and plugging you in the classroom with our Sunday school teachers, sort of hands-on, not just evaluating, but looking to equip, encourage, and sort of raise up that whole next generation of self-sufficient Sunday school teachers.
Yes.
Who, they haven't necessarily had someone tell them how to do it, but walk with them in doing it. Where, man, if God gives us 6 months to a year, well, that could be all kinds of great walking together training that will raise up maybe a whole generation of Sunday school leaders. So really wanting to lean into that. And I think that one-on-one personal thing is a giant strength of yours. And it will be an encouragement to them. And so just a little more info than we had time to give on Sunday.
Yes.
But I want to just touch on that and encourage our people to be praying. There again, just praying for God's unmissable call.
Yes.
That it's not just, oh, this is a good idea or this would be a great plan. There's a ton of people who've invested in things that sounded like a great plan, only they didn't know what was going to happen.
Yes.
And because we trust in the sovereignty of God, we're not just asking for the smoothest road for you,
right,
or the most comfortable road, but God, everything that you have made Jon and Kara for, all of the gifts and talents and abilities that you've packed inside of them, perfectly position them, perfectly time that positioning for the sake of your name and your kingdom.
Yes.
And that's, I think that is a biblical way to pray.
Yeah.
Whether we know somebody is leaving a position or not. That's how we should be praying for our leaders and encouraging them. That's how we should be praying for members one of another.
Yes.
And so I think that's a healthy exercise for our people to be doing.
Yeah.
While actively attempting to talk you out of it.
Well, there were some who did Sunday. We're praying that you'll change your mind was praying that you won't go. But it doesn't, Kara, something I hear her constantly telling the kids when talking about doing what God calls us to do through his word. She says, sometimes it's really hard, but remember, hard doesn't mean bad.
Yeah. Yep.
Hard doesn't mean bad. Good. So wise words from my wise wife.
Oh, so. Look at you totally redeeming yourself. Good. All right. Well, Lord willing, we will see you on this coming Sunday, worship at 10 a.m. and Sunday school at 9 a.m. So Lord willing, we'll see you then. All right. Thanks.